Welcome to Mysterious Goings On. Hey, it's me, Alex, and we're continuing with our summer series of pretty incredible guests today. And I don't want to make my guest nervous by already, dropping the incredible word on him. But I got to tell you, when I think about food writers and when I think about people who are experts at taking the sensory delight that is eating and transposing it into the world of words and doing it successfully, I can only think of a handful of people who I really enjoy reading when they do that. And one of them's Tony Bourdain. One of them's Jim Harrison. We've lost them both, but we've got one with us now who I really enjoy. He's also a friend of mine. It's Pete Dulin of Kansas City. Welcome, Pete Dulin, to Mysterious Goings On.
Thanks so much.
Hey,
pretty lofty company.
Yeah, you're in good company, and even better is that you're still living. So
yes, exactly.
let's keep it that way, shall we?
Absolutely. At least for this interview.
Yeah. Although I'm looking for some ratings that could help. No. Let's don't do that.
He killed it, literally.
Literally. Pete, we go way back. I met you, I think it was 2006. I was with the PBS station here in town in Kansas City, and you were running your own, which I think ahead of its time, online magazine, for want of a better term. And we were just kind of feeling out potential opportunities. Unfortunately, nothing worked out right away. I don't think. I think we did some things together, but I think it was the greatest thing I take away from that is that I met you and I was very impressed by what you were doing and all your varied interests. So just as a way of filling people in, though, who haven't known you since then, you are a writer, an author of several books. You speak. You're a chef. How would you describe yourself, though?
Well, I guess as far as the things that I do, that kind of sums it up. To really boil it down, it kind of comes down to the writing side and the culinary side. And I'm a creative person by nature, and I've been fortunate to be able to pursue a couple of different paths and have them overlap. So I worked in the corporate world for quite a while coming out of college, and after 10 years or so in the mutual fund industry, I realized that I was creatively burned out and that there was not much further for me to go in terms of having fulfilling work. So I kind of took a step back and looked at what were things I was passionate about, where I really wanted to spend my time. And it really came down to writing, cooking, or traveling, or some combination of them. And so I explored cooking initially, did a lot of research, and thought I might want to go to culinary school and become a chef. And so before I spent the money on school, I decided to get some practical experience and worked in some restaurants at a hotel, and then eventually landed at Le Fou Frog in the River Market area of Kansas City. And did that for several years, did catering on the side, and realized that while I really enjoyed learning a sensory aspect and the craft of it, I was in my early 30s at the time and felt like I had gotten into the industry about 10 years too late. So I switched gears.
Would you say that it was, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you say you got in about 10 years too late. Is it because it's so physically grueling? Is that part of it, or what?
Yeah, I think so. It's, you can certainly jump into the industry at different ages, different points in your life. And if you're really driven and determined and skilled, then I think you can be successful. But looking at the people that I was working with and other people in the industry, I realized that in order for me to get where I wanted to be, if I was going to become a chef, I wanted to be the best I possibly could. I didn't want to just become a career line cook, or, in order to really kind of make all the time and effort worthwhile, because you'll work 60, 70 hours a week, if you're at a place where it's really busy and thriving. And so there's a big trade-off there. And it does take its toll physically, mentally, and lifestyle-wise, because you're working when other people are off on the weekends or in the evenings. And I just decided that, one, the lifestyle wasn't quite for me, and two, being in my early 30s, by the time I got really good at becoming a chef and learning, it would be 7-8 years down the road. So it'd be closer to 40 when your body does start to slow down and break down from all the physical, grueling work. So I stepped back a little bit to reevaluate and look at other options. And that kind of led me to the next major shift, which was pursuing writing. Mm-hmm. And so I applied to graduate school and got into Emerson College, based in Boston.
Yes.
And they have an excellent writing program there. And I was drawn to their nonfiction, or creative nonfiction writing program. A lot of schools that I researched across the country, they would have an emphasis in fiction or poetry or other literary arts, which I didn't think would provide a very viable career path. And I didn't want to go into straight journalism, because that really didn't suit my writing skills or interests. So I found this program at Emerson where this track of writing nonfiction, but in a creative way that borrowed from elements of fiction techniques, was incorporated into the writing. And that's just a fancy way of saying that you could do storytelling about nonfiction subject matter.
Yeah,
and that really appealed to me.
Well, and that's evident. Just indulge me, and I probably won't read it as well as you wrote it, but let me just read something. This is from Pete's blog. He's probably sitting here going, I did not know you're going to read from my blog, but I'm going to. Just listen to this sentence. You cannot touch smoke. Smoke touches you. The scent of smoke from wild plum, oak, grapevine, and lavender clings to my skin, my hair, and my clothes. Smoke hangs on with persistence, a ghost that lingers, a presence that is intangible, but most certainly there. I mean, that's the lead-in to a blog post about a fire that you built, and there's way more to that than that at a winery at the winery you work at. And I just have to tell you, it's so funny how I had that teed up because I love that sentence. And here you are talking about it. So now I fully understand that, because I don't think I was aware you went to Emerson. And it's clear that you definitely learned your craft very well.
Thank you. That passage, I think, it exemplifies like the type of writing I would like to do all the time, or at least aspire to, where you're able to write about something that's real, that's happening, and describe it in a way that excites the senses, draws people in,
right.
Not necessarily in a sensational way, but in a way that it's with the word choices and the phrasing and just the perspective, that it's something that people may not have looked at it or thought about it in quite that way. And so they're just drawn in out of curiosity. As humans, like, we are drawn to stories,
right,
all the way back from the days of being in caves or campfires to today, where we're staring at digital screens, our own little handheld campfires, if you will, and getting stories through words and images and videos that way. Writing-wise, I think it's still a powerful way to describe the world and experiences, but it's also challenging because oftentimes as a writer, it's about producing quickly, succinctly, efficiently,
right.
And you don't always have the time or the opportunity to be more creative and shape set the scene and describe things in a more creative way.
Right. I started my career, I cut my teeth. I have a degree in writing, not from Emerson, but I have a degree in writing, and I cut my teeth, though, as a journalist, where this kind of writing would be more called a feature style rather than a straight news style. But I seem to excel more at that, actually. It seemed like more, I guess if bylines are a judge, most of my bylines I got were for kind of things in that vein. The more, I guess, as you say, the more kind of the creative nonfiction style. I think that's why I'm drawn to what you write, Pete, is because I'm a big fan of, as I said, of Jim Harrison, and his last book, A Really Big Lunch, is like one of my favorite books of all time. It's one of those books where you're constantly underlining stuff, and or if you're like me, I'm a little finicky about my books that I keep, and sometimes I don't fully underline. I might put a Post-it note in there, and then I realize, well, that looks ridiculous because you've got a book with this big fan of Post-it notes, sticking out of it. But I get that when I read your stuff. And you write for a number of publications. There's a publication there. You're seeing quite a very nice glossy publication called Feast that's pretty big here in Missouri. But you've written for some other publications. Is there and I don't want to put you on the spot too much here, but is there a particular piece you've ever written that is just like, oh my gosh, this is my Citizen Kane here. This is my thing. Or are you still chasing it?
I think it's still chasing it in a way. It's part of it is that there's always room for improvement. There's always a different way to tell a story, and part of it's what you want to bring to the assignment if you're writing freelance, like I do for many publications, and also what the publication's voice and its intent and the audience is trying to reach, and what the editor wants. A lot of the freelance work that I do is a bit more news-driven, right, or like reporting, food journalism, if you will. Mm-hmm. So there was, and this is quite a while back, but years ago I wrote a story for the Kansas City Star about tea, Lucy's Tea, and I focused on a couple of different people in Kansas City that were connected to tea. That was a fun story to write because one of them was Zhang Tea, based in Crown Center in Kansas City. Mm-hmm. And he has this tea farm that's in the mountains in a remote part of China. Mm-hmm. And it was a way to introduce the idea of this tea that he actually grows, harvest process, and then ships halfway around the world to sell in the shop in Kansas City. It was a wonderful opportunity to build a story around this individual character, if you will, set the scene with the lush landscape and the conditions where the tea bushes are grown, and then describe the process of how he harvests and processes that tea and brings it here.
Right.
And then those sorts of stories are always ones that I love to tell and would like to chase more. But again, it kind of depends on the publication I'm writing for, and the opportunity doesn't always present itself. So it's having my blog is kind of a good outlet, I guess, to do more storytelling-driven writing that doesn't necessarily fit in the box of publications.
Yeah, and you also on your social media, I love it when you just talk about a meal you had. And I'm not going to give away who this is about, but can I just do one? You start off this piece you did recently, and it's self-critical food review. And I'm not going to say the location or anything, but it's like, clearly the cut broccoli was frozen and chopped unevenly. Further, it had freezer burn, so some pieces were Frankenstein gray green instead of bright green. Inedible. The burgers were cooked to temperature and resembled a homemade patty, providing a quick nostalgia trip back to childhood bliss. However, the honey wheat bread was a poor substitute for actual burger buns. Disappointing. Melted cheese strewn across the pickles, onions, and mushrooms resembled a line cook's fanciful interpretation of a Jackson Pollock painting. Or maybe the kitchen didn't have a block of sharp white cheddar to slice and melt for better presentation. Sad. And I'm laughing because I enjoy the writing, and I'm picturing it. There's not even a photo, I don't think, in this post of what you're eating. It's just your descriptions are so rich, and you know what? And just so people understand, Pete is not like unfair or me. You always seem to be bending over backwards to find something good about just about every meal you eat. Is that fair?
Yeah, generally, yeah. I mean, if I'm going to write about it, I'd rather emphasize the positive rather than highlight the negative just for the sake of being negative. You know, I think there's a room and need to have informed criticism, particularly about food, and I emphasize informed because everybody has an opinion.
Right.
Not necessarily everybody is informed or knowledgeable about what they're talking about. But like with that piece of writing that you just read, it's one, it was just kind of a one-off thing,
Right.
and part of it was the idea popped into my head. And if it's not clear to your listeners, I was actually describing a meal that I had prepared. So I was actually being the food critic of my own food.
Exactly, but I didn't want to say it. I wanted to see if you'd say it.
So it was kind of poking fun at myself as the cook or chef, and I say that with air quotes, but also food writers and Yelpers, in particular, people that offer opinions on social media about food and how it can be a bit pretentious and overly analytical at times.
Right.
So that was written certainly tongue-in-cheek,
Definitely,
but honest.
Well, it was, and there's more. There's so much. I'd love to read the whole thing, but the ending is so great that it brings it home here. Likely won't order this same meal again. Hard not to eat here since it is so close to home. Heard there's chocolate chip ice cream. Might raid the freezer later. Definitely won't leave a tip. It's Pete. It's a joy. It's I am always looking for excuses not to open Facebook. Yeah, and I mean seriously, I am. If I weren't involved in this big communications industry I'm involved in, I wonder that I'd still be there. But you're one of those bright, shining moments there that really that makes it work for me. So thank you for that. But there was another one you did recently too, and I don't mean to just keep dinging, pulling stuff out here, but it really spoke to me. It's like, but the way you talk about food, though, there was some group or local group, a foodie club of some sort, right, that were making some comments about food, and you just laid into them. And you're like, utterly pretentious and self-absorbed. Some of the best food I have eaten in the world didn't look pretty in presentation and certainly wasn't prepared for the sake of someone's Instagram feed. Yet another example of why I dislike self-important, quote, foodies, unquote, and, quote, influencers, unquote. I think that's how you say pfft. Anyway, it was a raspberry.
Right.
I want to break bread with people, not self-important, shallow ding-dongs that preach about, quote, respect, unquote. And I mean, do you get... This is another reason why I think that your food writing is so good. You get passionate about this, and I've known from kind of working around you or knowing you for a few years. We're not like bosom pals, but I've been around you enough to know you don't suffer fools, and it comes out.
True, and it's I think there's just looking at the two pieces that you cited from Facebook posts, I mean, very different in a way. And like the first one, where I'm just critiquing my own cooking in this meal, was both. It was just a kind of a fun idea,
right?
And something like it pops into my head, and it's a fun thing to do. But also, it's kind of a writing exercise, if you will, to flex the creative muscles and to do something that's a little offbeat or different. And there's no real consequences to it, but it's a way to get out of the routine and write in a different way. And so sometimes I'll do that, whether it's social media or my blog, just to keep the writing skills honed or to do things in a different way. The other piece that you read, it was a little bit more critical of influencers in particular, about foodies that are quote-unquote influencers, was definitely more personal and disappointed in, I think, just the passion of my opinion definitely came through without trying to be too hateful about it.
Right.
But I have pretty strong opinions about the value of some influencers. I don't want to be too
right.
Generic and broad-based. There's certainly value with the role of influencers, whether it's food or other arenas. But a lot of them have kind of taken their platform, if you will, and taken advantage of it, or tried to profit from it in a way that's detrimental to the business that they're writing about, that they are supposedly trying to promote and support.
Right.
And it's a somewhat recent phenomenon, I guess, in social media and, the rise of influencers, that there's just an extension of both foodie culture as well as social media culture revolving around food.
Well,
Yelp.
Oh, yeah, Yelp. Wow. Yeah.
So, and just to kind of draw a further distinction, with the whole phenomenon of social media and, giving rise to platforms like Yelp, where people can offer their own reviews or commentary, if you will. That's not necessarily a bad thing in and of itself. Access to the internet and platforms like that has democratized the reviewing process, whether it's about movies or food or what have you. So if, as a consumer, if you're looking at, where should I go dine out to eat? You're on vacation or you're traveling for business and you're in an unfamiliar place, then you can turn to a resource like Yelp and you're crowdsourcing, essentially.
True.
Now, there's a lot of noise in the signal, and so depending on what your tastes are and who you're reading, as far as Yelp reviews, it can be of some value or no value at all. But the person that's consuming those reviews, and there's the many people that are generating the reviews, and then you have influencers, which, in my opinion, the vast majority of them, they're serving themselves first. Their influence is really built around the following they build their aesthetic, their identity, and then what they believe they're offering, one, to their social media audience, and two, they're trying to leverage that influence or their reputation to the businesses that they're covering. And more of them are doing so in a way where they're expecting freebies, they're expecting consideration, and things that actually cost the restaurant or bar by comping them free food and drink. And sometimes not just for themselves, but I'm going to bring 6 of my besties and we're all going to post photos and, text. And so that kind of evolution of writing a review that's, crowdsourced and it's out there and people can take it for what it's worth, versus shifting the axis, if you will, where the influencer is the center point and everything they write and produce revolves around them and people gravitate towards that. Now, that has some, you can say, well, what's the difference between that versus a food editor or food critic for a major newspaper?
Right.
At a very basic level, there's some parallels as far as what the person's trying to do, but usually, and there are some key distinctions there. If you're a food critic writing for a website, a newspaper, or some other professional organization, there's usually a code of ethics there.
Right.
And you're getting paid, you're getting edited, other people are looking at your work. So there's kind of some structure and things in place before it actually goes live and gets published. Whereas influencers don't necessarily have those criteria in place as far as ethics and being edited, and a lot of times, like, they're just simply amateurs, people that profess a love for food, but they don't have much, if any, training
right.
with writing or journalism, and so the way they think and promote and what they ask for sometimes exceeds the normal boundaries of how a food reporter or food critic would operate.
Yeah, and of course, I'm a trained journalist, used to be one, and so I think that's one reason why I think when podcasting started, it was a little easier for me to get certain guests, not for this, because I've been podcasting since about the time I met you, and for a while there, I was getting some national guests for a different show I used to do about politics, and the one comment I got a lot was, "Oh man, you actually talk to me like a journalist would," and so right. So, but nowadays though, I mean, you can technically podcast out of your pocket with your phone. You can definitely, I describe this to a lot of my clients. I'm like, you have the entire news media in your pocket, and if you have a smartphone, I mean. You've got a TV station, it's called YouTube. You've got a radio station for all intents and purposes, which could be a podcast, or Twitter even. Twitter kind of short bursts like radio. You got a newspaper, and that's like Facebook. So there's this whole thing. So everybody's empowered, which is a good thing to a degree. But not everybody is informed. The way you said earlier, I like informed opinions. I kind of feel that way about voting. I'm not the one that says everybody go out and vote. I'm really not. I'm the guy who says, if you bothered to look onto the issues and know anything about the candidates, please go vote. If you haven't, please stay home. That's what I tell people all the time. But so thinking about this too, the other thing that could be damaging is when you have kind of an amateur person and doing what you were saying, like, I'm going to bring all my pals and we're going to do this. Restaurants in general are operating on razor thin margins, and just can't afford to treat everybody and their dog. I mean, right? Right.
And absolutely. And so, in the restaurants, bars to a lesser extent, but restaurants and the chefs, owners, they get asked for freebies and handouts and things that cost them money every single day.
Yep.
Not just from influencers or people that have a unsatisfactory experience and they want to be comped for this or that, but also from nonprofits or people in the community. They're trying to do fundraisers or other events, and there's a certain purpose for that, and it's noble and there's a honorable goal, I guess. But there's so many nonprofits, there's so many causes, if you will, where everybody's trying to fundraise, and these chefs and owners of restaurants, they get bombarded to the point where it's just not sustainable.
Oh, yeah.
And you'd be literally giving away the store week in, week out, and how are you supposed to make payroll and operate your business if you're giving away so much? So there's, it's striking a balance.
It's definitely a give and take. I mean, there's no restaurant, especially starting out, who doesn't want some good word of mouth going out there. I guess it's just part of the business. And you talked about your love of food and wanting to be a chef and wanting to do these things, and you have to a different degree and a different path than you initially thought. But I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, in addition to your food writing that you do for publications and that thing, but you've also written, I believe, is it about 4 books about food, beer, wine, and spirits? And I mean, you'll tell me don't say this, but I think you're the dean of those topics in Kansas City as far as is laying out who and what and where you can go to get the best craft beer or spirits or wines in the area. So when did this happen? When did you, I mean, because I know food and drink are obviously together, but not every chef I know of, not every cook I know of, not every foodie or food enthusiast I know knows anything about spirits and beer and wine.
Well, first of all, thanks for your kind remarks. So I've been a freelance writer for about 20 years, part-time, full-time, and the bulk of that's been focused on food writing, but I've done business writing and about other topics. And I would say about 6 years ago, I started pitching ideas or stories about craft beer, because that was trending in Kansas City. There were more breweries that were opening up. And, craft beer is just kind of a new contemporary name for microbrewed beer.
Right.
And there's some, differences. And microbrewed beer has been around in Kansas City for quite a while, as well as elsewhere around the country. Boulevard is celebrating its 30th anniversary this year.
Wow.
Which kind of brings me back to part of my inspiration for my second book, which was Casey Ale Trail, was the 25th anniversary of Boulevard Brewing, as well as Free State Brewing in Lawrence. In 2014, they were both going to celebrate their 25th anniversary. And I had, the tail end of 2013, had visited some breweries in Northwest Arkansas and was thinking a lot about craft beer and this idea of writing about breweries in Kansas City and what has opened up and is operating over the past 25 years leading up to the anniversary of Boulevard and Free State became the kernel for this book, Casey Ale Trail.
Oh, okay.
And I wanted to produce that book in 2014, the year that the anniversary is being celebrated. So I ended up self-publishing the book.
Huh.
And I've had different career experiences where I know enough about writing, editing. I've done some print production. I had a good friend that's a really strong designer and art director, Eric Shotland. He and I kind of collaborated. I did my due diligence on the business side, and I worked with a print broker to figure out the best way to print the book in a way that would be reasonable cost. Then I worked with Eric, the art director, to create the look and feel for the book, and then went out and did the work of researching, writing, editing, photographing, and pulling that book together in just a few months, and was able to get the book published by, I think, October or November of 2014. And it was just, it was a great experience, both to challenge myself and to push myself writing-wise, but also use these other skills that I had to produce something that was physical versus just a newspaper article or an online article. I had something physical to show for my efforts and something I could sell.
Right.
And this is, still relatively early in as far as self-publishing and how that avenue was catching on among writers.
Right.
So that, I think, the previous book that I did was a cookbook that I published as a compilation of recipes that had been published in the Kansas City Star magazine.
Last Bite.
Featuring work by other stuff. Yeah, Last Bite.
Yeah, with the wonderful photography from Roy Inman in there. Oh, my goodness.
Absolutely. And I'm so really proud of that book. And that featured recipes from the top chefs and cooks around Kansas City at the time. It was published by the Kansas City Star's book department when there was one. Ugh. And I learned a lot about publishing and promoting books through that experience. And I collaborated both with Roy Inman on photography as well as Eric Shotland, again, on the design of the book, and had a lot of free reign to kind of pull that book together. And we literally produced that book in about 3 months. It was a crazy fast timetable.
I remember, I'm sorry to interrupt, I interviewed you and Roy about this for my company blog when this came out, and I don't think I realized you put it together in that short a time. Maybe you did tell me at the time, but it didn't stick. You put this incredible book together in about 3 months?
Yeah, part of it was so the book featured 100 recipes. Again, it was published in the Star. So most of the photographs had been published in the newspaper,
True.
As well as the recipes. So part of it was just deciding on what material was going to be there, creating material for the front of the book as far as an introduction and a forward, figuring out the organization and coordinating between the art director and the photographer to pull it all together.
Right.
Which even having the material off the shelf, so to speak, 3 months was an incredibly fast timeline to pull together. Like, a traditional book publisher wouldn't be able to do that kind of project in that amount of speed unless they were to drop all their other projects.
Yeah. And it's such an elegant book. It's so elegant, and it's so. And I, of course, used to get when I get the Star and open up the recipes, but it's so great to have them in one spot. I have this book. I've attempted a few recipes. It's a delight. It really is.
Thank you. One of the great takeaways from both the cookbook Last Bite as well as Casey Ale Trail that I self-published was not only the writing aspect, but then kind of acting as the editor and project manager for both of the books to pull them together.
Right.
And then switching hats to be the promoter and the social media manager for it, and then getting out and creating events.
Right.
And learning all the things that are almost kind of a given if you're a self-published author, or even if you're published traditionally.
Oh, yeah.
Today, you're kind of expected to wear all those hats to promote your book, to do events. And so I realized that I needed to learn those things, and I didn't expect to make any money off of those first two books. I just treated it as a learning curve. Fortunately, both books did some modest sales and was able to generate some income off of them.
Do you bring those in tow with you when you do speaking engagements to this day, or do you just kind of tell people you can find me on Amazon, or how do you do that now? Everything that I've learned, writing-wise and publishing-wise, is kind of built on itself and carries forward. So the next two books that I published, I did the same thing and wore the same hats, and I understood, all right, I need to do this for social media. I need to set up events and do things that would grab the attention of my audience and meet people where they were. Right.
So the third book that I did was Kansas City Beer, a history of brewing in Kansas City. And then my most recent book is Expedition of Thirst, which explores breweries, wineries, and distilleries in central Kansas and Missouri. And each of those books, the nice thing is that they're very topical and they're very focused. So, people enjoy food and drink. And so you're already meeting people halfway there if they're interested in that topic. And then it's just explaining to them the purpose of the book and the appeal of it. And it takes some work. Like having great material and a great cover to the book is important.
Yes.
But there's a lot of hand selling and promoting the book online and creating events and doing talks at libraries or before groups to share the message of the book and background that's going to generate interest and word of mouth.
And all the hats you still wear, speaking of hats. Now, you're also, I guess, your day job in a lot of ways, you're a chef and an event manager at a local winery, correct?
Yes. So about a year ago, I kind of switched gears from full-time freelance writing because one of the wineries that I discovered when I was researching Expedition of Thirst was Fence-Style Vineyards and Winery based in Excelsior Springs. And as I got to know the owner and she got to know me, she realized that I had this culinary background, but also communications background, and she had a need for both. And so I started doing work on the side for her and the winery while I was freelance writing. And then about a year ago, I switched where I was writing part-time, and then I took a full-time position with the winery where I can work as the chef and produce food for catered events at the winery, as well as specials on the weekend, and create food that's out of caliber with the wine.
Right.
And then also represent the winery through the communications, newsletter, social media, website, and events to represent the brand.
Yeah, and there's some wonderfully tasty posts you do, both on your personal accounts and on the winery's account, of the really game-changing things I think you're doing, pairing is the word, Alex, pairing these wonderful wines that Fence Style produces with some delightful ingredients. And what I love is you seem to be in love with, and as you should be, I believe, fresh ingredients and seasonal ingredients. And you seem to always have something, you're whipping up something that, of course, a Philistine like myself would never have thought of, but will definitely eat. So I just love what you're coming up with. And so I think as we wind down here, I wanted to ask you, though, would you say that is something that feeds your creative impulses a little bit to come up with those kind of pairings and those kinds of dishes?
Absolutely. I think if you're creative innately, having more than one channel or place to demonstrate your creativity is important, and one can feed the other. And what I didn't realize 20 years ago when I was at Emerson College, and I realized, I can draw upon my cooking background to inform the writing I wanted to do, and that I could be a food writer and write from a different perspective than the average person even back then. And this is, the relatively early days of food writing, modern food writing, I should say, before, the term food porn was created, and then, even before foodies existed. I realized professionally I could marry both interests, and that my love of food and how it stimulates the senses could carry over to the writing that I did then. And that's those two things, food and writing, have kind of been pathways that have crisscrossed throughout my career, even today, when I'm working at the winery and working with fresh ingredients that are seasonal and local, and where I source them, informs the cooking, but also how I, write and share about it. And it keeps my senses sharp as well as a writer, if I'm writing about other topics or other businesses. I think it's really important and something that writers either don't develop or they overlook a lot of times is the use of your senses.
Right.
And we rely on our visual sense so much, just day to day, whether you're a writer or not. But paying attention to how things smell, taste, the texture, the sound, are all things that you can incorporate into writing, or just, even if you're just doing a short little ditty about your day or an experience that you had at the lake, or if you're writing a Yelp review or something on social media about this fantastic experience, you can incorporate the senses and use that in a way to make it more immediate, more visceral, more interesting, versus just laying on the flowery words and description, or, oh my God, that was just amazing.
It's amazing. I really want the word amazing to be retired from everybody's vocabulary, because, as I'm fond of saying, if everything's amazing, nothing's amazing.
Right, exactly.
If everything is awesome, nothing is awesome.
Right. So yeah, definitely, my work at the winery informs my writing, and the writing that I do also informs how I cook and present food, and the things that I learn at the winery too, because I have a very small hand in helping with some of the winery work and bottling and harvesting grapes in the fall, And all those different activities are learning experiences, and it provides more experience, if you will, that I can store up in my creative bank and draw on later, whether it's about the winery or about something else, because I've had these rich experiences in my life.
It's so evident. Hey, I'm going to do something mean to you. I wanted to ask for a quick lightning round, just a couple of little quick answer things, because we've gone long and I don't care, because I just this is one of those interviews that I've so enjoyed, and I look at the clock and I go, holy cats, we just started 10 minutes. And I go, oh no, we didn't. But I so enjoy hearing your perspectives, and of course I love food. I'm an amateur cook myself, and I'm constantly learning, and always kind of figuratively looking over your shoulder to try and get tips. But let me ask you something really quick. What is one thing, and I mean, again, this is kind of a short thing, so if you can, what is one thing you wish, on behalf of being somebody who makes food, but also somebody who as you so wonderfully discussed, respects food in the sense of who makes it and how it's consumed and using all your senses. What's one tip or one thing you would wish people would know or think about next time they're at a restaurant?
I would say ask questions. If you're genuinely interested in food and or drink, ask questions to learn. It expresses interest. It creates an opportunity for exchange. And whether you're chatting with the chef, the sommelier, the server, or the bartender, as long as you're not obnoxious, you're not asking a million questions when they're super busy. More often than not, they're happy to share that information with you, because these people are professionals. They're experts at what they do. They have so much information that oftentimes they don't have the opportunity to share. But if you take an interest and you ask, well, where did this wine come from, or what does it mean to be biodynamic, or I'm not familiar with this ingredient or this cooking technique, can you tell me about it? That creates an opportunity for dialogue and communication, and that helps you grow to be more informed. It also builds that relationship with the person that you're interacting with. And
a few weeks ago, I was just outside of Chicago with a friend, visiting a friend, and we went to a restaurant, and he loves Thai food and Vietnamese food, and he frequently goes there for work, and so we went to this place not far from where we were, and sat down. And I ordered. I just started asking questions about the pad thai. That's what I wanted. He was going to eat